Hi everyone, my name's Janelle. I'm a functional nutritionist who lives and plays in the Sierra Mountains, and this is my podcast where we talk about functional health with a mountain twist in 30 minutes or less. Today I am talking with the brilliant Susan Willson. Susan is a Yale educated and trained certified nurse midwife. She has spent her career helping support and empower women to trust their bodies and work with its natural intelligence. Susan has worked with the Navajo in Africa for the CDC, with the Alaska Natives, Mexican, and Pacific Rim cultures. She has spent the later part of her career working with menopausal women and believes menopause is both positive and purposeful, and that it is shaped by our early experiences and how we experience ourselves as women. Today, we're discussing the mindset of menopause, a key part of rocking midlife. Regardless of what tools you use to support yourself through perimenopause and menopause, it is a huge transition, and it's up to us how we show up for it, and it's never too soon to dig in. Welcome, everybody, and welcome, Susan. I am so honored to have you here. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Happy to be here.
So, my friend Haven told me about your book, Making Sense of Menopause, and she introduced us. I loved this book. It
Mm,
is such an incredible gift to
thank you.
midlife and menopausal women. So, thank you so much for that. And I really thought I knew what I wanted to discuss with you today. And then I got to the last few chapters of your book just yesterday. And I'm going to confess, I'm going to tell you that reading it felt a little bit like a book orgasm. And I don't know if you remember the Meg Ryan, the cafe scene in When
Mhm,
Harry Met Sally. So
mhm.
that was me reading the last few chapters of your book. I was like, yes, yes, yes. I mean, I had so much underlined and so much tagged. So I loved it.
Thank you.
um,
So glad.
there are so many things that impact our experience through menopause or perimenopause and menopause and then postmenopause. We have so much at the physical level, including our microbiome and our liver health, our adrenals, blood sugar, thyroid, blah, blah, blah. So many things on a physical level that impact this experience. But there's also this huge emotional and spiritual component, and that's what I was really hoping to discuss with you today. So, to jump in, so many people fear getting older and hitting menopause. So, in your opinion, why do you think menopause has such a bad rap in our modern world?
I think a lot of it has to do with the culture that you live in, because other cultures don't always experience it the same way that we do here. And I think a lot of why we experience it the way that we do here is that we kind of deify youth and really young people in our culture. I mean, even the models that we have that are held up are now often 15, 16 year olds that are kind of made up to look older. So what that was actually one of the first things that put my foot on the path to looking at the emotional work of menopause. And that is that when I would work with women, I would find that they were always kind of looking back over their shoulder at what they had lost. I mean, moving into menopause was all about loss, what they would never have again, what they no longer were, that they no longer were gonna have value. And I thought, wow, that is really sad because here we are at the peak of our lives, if you ask me, and we have, all this wisdom we've accumulated. We have gifts to give both to our culture and to our families and those coming behind us. And women were getting stopped in their tracks by that. They could not progress. And I really started to see menopause as this crossroads where women are either willing to embrace it, see the value, and see the gift that's being given to them, or they start to diminish and kind of give up and fall away. And a lot of that, I think, is the fault of the culture. Certainly in my age group, we were not raised to live for ourselves, to think, that we had a whole lot to offer, unless we were very lucky. Many women went to college just to find husbands, so we were taught to value ourselves based on someone else's reflection rather than on who we knew ourselves to be. But as you get older too, that if you're inhabiting who you are and inhabiting the wisdom of that, there's an amazing beauty that's in that that really shines out. So
Mhm.
we've been taught to think menopause is something that's going to happen to you. There's nothing you can do about it. It's going to be horrible. Get ready.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what women are looking forward to. So they don't want to think about it until the very last minute. And then they don't start really thinking about it till they're in the middle of symptoms. And
Right.
it's like being in the spin cycle. And so then it's very difficult to tease anything out or have any kind of perspective when you're in the middle of having symptoms. All you want to do is make it stop. So um, I would really love to see women start thinking about this process earlier on, see it for the continuum it is from the moment we're born until the moment we die and beyond, and begin to look at it that way, because nature prepares us for all of it. We have all the tools we need to have. Our body knows what to do. And there is a distinct purpose to each part of our lives. We can live
Mm-hmm.
into that and recognize it.
You've said so much already that I want to highlight. So first of all, I think what you said was really interesting. So I'm 70, I'm about 50, and I think the different generations. And so, my generation of women, even if we went and had a big career and did a lot for ourselves, I still think that hormone estrogen, I love it, it's the best, but it's that people pleasing hormone. So,
Mhm.
whatever generation you're in, you're still dealing with pleasing other people, no matter what it looks like, um, depending on when you were born and brought up. And so, when that goes away, in midlife, that's when we have that big change. And
Mhm.
that's what's going to shake us up. So, no matter what it was like for us culturally, we're still going to get this shake up where we're thinking less about others. And we have this opportunity to think about ourselves and come into alignment with what we feel is important, what we want to bring into our lives, who we are at our core, at our essence. And so much of your book is a guidebook into doing that. It's a workbook into finding who are you, what are you on this earth for, what do you want, and how do you want to live the second half of your life. It's so amazing in that way. And so I just wanted to click on that. And then I there's so many things I want to go into, but before we do, I think this would be a great time to hear, what do you think the second half of life can look like? So we kind of started with, where it got its bad name. So what do you feel like the second half of our life can be like? What are we shooting for?
Well, I think what you're mentioning is important. I mean, I always call estradiol the doormat hormone because
Ah,
it's the one that really encourages us to make babies, nurture everything in sight, put others before us, their needs come first. And then, people have this view that when menopause happens, all your estrogen goes away. It doesn't, it just changes form. The estradiol, the doormat hormone, goes down, and estriol, which is a creative hormone, goes up. And they stimulate different parts of the brain. the estradiol stimulating that nurturing part, the reproductive part, the um, furthering the next generation. And then the estriol comes up and stimulates the creative centers in your brain. So that's why you have midlife women wanting to um, dance that dance, write that book, paint that painting, reach that goal that they've had that's just for themselves. And a lot of women ask, well, I haven't thought about myself in so many years. How do I even begin to find out what I really want? And I always suggest they remember what their 10-year-old was like before the hormones hit. Okay, so what did you love then? What excited you then? What did you think you were going to be when you grew up? And that will start to give you a clue from where to go. But what this is about, and nature has a plan for every single part of this continuum. And I do want to say here that I really believe our hormones turn us into different creatures, literally, when our hormone balances change, because it changes you, your body changes, your brain changes, your desires and longings change. It's very literally, even though it sounds trite, it's very literally like the caterpillar and the butterfly. They have exactly the same DNA, and one grows out of the other, but they have different physical being, different purpose, different longings, different that lifespan in terms of what that particular incarnation of theirs is going to be like. And that's really what happens. I mean, we have in the womb where we're bombarded by different hormones that change us into male or female. And then we're latent and we hit puberty and we get this tidal wave of hormones that begins to grow curves if you're going to become a woman, or, the testosterone comes in and makes male characteristics, each of having different purposes, different ways they look, different abilities. Then we hit perimenopause and menopause, and the same thing is happening. Our body changes, our brain changes, what we want changes, and what we're able to do in the world. So what nature's purpose, from what I can tell and what anthropologists have told us, is that as we get into what I call our wisdom years, which is the postmenopausal years, we're the memory keepers. We're there to be nurturing and evolving, really, the human race, in my point of view.
Yeah, and this is even reminding me of so many things in your book that I got about just change in general. I mean, first off, I just think people don't like change. I think humans don't like change. I mean, even back to the days when I was a river guide and they wanted to put in a dam or take out a dam, it didn't matter. People didn't want change
Mhm.
either way. And
Yeah.
so I just think that's an inherent human characteristic. And like what you're saying is reminding me that when we're close to nature, when we're connected to nature, change is inevitable. Like seasons change, life, like it just change is inevitable. And so probably the more disconnected we are from nature and the present moment and inside ourselves, which technology in the modern world is definitely doing to us, or creating the environment for, it's just harder to appreciate that change is good. Change is what we're going for. Change is part of life. Change is part of growing. There's great things that happen on the other side. And I think we've totally lost sight of that. But that's not to say that those wobbly years when hormones are changing, we see it in our teens, and then we definitely experience it. My friend group at this age in life, like that's real. Discomfort is happening. Like that's
Yes.
not, I'm not saying that that's, all fine and good and accept it, but like, what is that discomfort telling us? Like, what is it waking us up to? I sort of believe that perimenopause is this wake up phase of like, okay, well, what's not working in my life? What's working? And I love in your book that you really speak into leaning in sort of to that discomfort and listening to what it's saying and taking the time and the space. I mean, you have this part about dark time, really that being an initiation and in a portal into the next level and looking deep into that and reflecting on who you are. And I think that's what you were speaking about being present in the moment. And so much of your book is again a workbook into figuring out what is true in your present world and what don't you accept anymore, what doesn't work for you anymore. And sometimes it takes some months and years of discomfort and digging in to get there so that you can take that next step into your wise years. So I love your analogy of the caterpillar turning into the butterfly and so much of that. So maybe I can ask you, I mean, your book is a guidebook to this, but how do women in perimenopause and menopause, it's never too late, start digging into this and coming into really know themselves and what they want? Like, how do we do that?
Well, I think that just showing up for it is a big piece. And a lot of times women are kind of intimidated by it. It just seems too much. It's all too overwhelming. And I like to remind people that wherever you are, you're on the path. I mean,
Mm,
it's not like you have to go from A all the way over to B to get started, or you have to change everything at once. Wherever you are, first take stock and then take one little step, and there's a ripple effect
mm,
that happens. And I think we want change to happen fast in our culture. And I think that that's one thing that connecting with nature, as you spoke about before, can really help us with. Nature changes, but it's slow, it's
mm,
rhythmic, right? So
mm, mhm,
if you're really rooted where you are, and if we do that with nature, that pace is slower. So we have more time to adapt because adaptation is a lot of what our bodies are made to do. And if we can begin earlier than the symptoms happen, the women that did the best that I saw were those that were proactive. They would come in when they were 40 and not having symptoms and say, okay, I know this is in front of me. What can I do to prepare? And if you're not in the middle of having a lot of symptoms, then you can take things in order and say,
mm,
okay, first tell me your stories. How were you raised? How do you think about being a woman right now at your age? How do you think about menopause? What were your role models for older women? Were they happy, joyful, creative, or were they shut down and bitter? And, what is it you think you're looking forward to? And then you can start to work with the adrenal system, which supports the whole body and which is very, very intricately connected to our hormone balance. And, you can take it slowly. It's like throwing the frog into boiling water, they'll jump out.
mhm,
If you put them in and slowly heat the water up, they die because they never notice what's happening. That adaptation happens so slowly. And that's what's happening to a lot of women that I saw. They arrived at midlife totally stressed, had never even noticed how stressed they were, because when we're under the influence of estradiol, people keep putting one more thing on our plate and we just do it. We make
mhm,
it
mhm,
happen somehow.
mhm,
And then we find ourselves where our body really needs that floor under us and needs the adrenal system, because that's what takes over when the ovaries start shutting down and lowering estradiol. It's supposed to be your adrenals and fat cells that take over your hormone production. Nothing was there to take it. When the ball was thrown, nothing was there to catch it. And the symptoms start spiraling downward so quickly. And then you're in the thick of it. And all you can think about is get me out. You don't
mhm,
have the bandwidth to even
mhm,
begin to think, why is this happening? It's as bad as they told me it would be, and
Mhm.
how do I get through this, you know?
Mhm.
Whereas if we can start looking at it earlier and slowly understand what it is nature's doing and how it works, we can nourish our body toward that. We can give it what it needs. We can understand the symptoms better. So I think, again, as you said, the book has a lot of self-inquiry in it where women can just ask some basic questions of their self. Well, what was this like when I was young? Or whose voice is this in my head that's
Mm.
telling me this, that, or the other? And begin to tease apart what's authentic now. Because just like we turn into different creatures when our hormones shift, we become different people. So what's
Mm.
authentic for
Mm.
us different at each given time. And
Yeah,
if
I
we
love that, and you say in the book, you say, let me see if I remember it correctly. It's like a yard sale of life. So moving towards your authenticity, it's like a yard sale in life where you're seeing what's not authentic anymore and you're
Mhm.
clearing it out.
Mhm. Saying, "Oh, maybe somebody else could use this. That'll be great," or "This was grand and it was wonderful." Some things are difficult to give up, and for a lot of women that reach this part of life, that they find that their childbearing years are over and they had never given that enough thought, or they had never met the right person, or they had infertility issues. Even women who thought they never wanted children, when that possibility is taken away, it makes you look at all of that again. It brings it up. And so there's also a lot of grief that is involved for some people in moving into this next stage of life. And our culture does not do grief well.
Mhm.
If
Mm.
we do it at all, we do it in private. We were never, allowed to make that public without being seen as a spectacle somehow. So there's no room for it. And grief takes space, it takes room and time to be able to really look at something and allow your feelings to process through that.
Mhm. So one big thing I hear you saying is that this emotional part is big, but it's more challenging to address when our body is speaking louder.
Yeah.
So, one thing we can do is start earlier on the process. And then something I always sort of teach is like if you can get your physical body not to talk as loud. So, working on those things I mentioned earlier, and the earlier you start it, then you can really dig more into this emotional belief system so that you can reach that next level, as my kids would say, up level. That's what I
Mhm.
call it now, up leveling menopause. Um, so you can do that better when you start earlier and when your body isn't speaking as loudly. So,
It sounds kind of new agey to some people, but it's not. It's solidly based in science that our beliefs and our perceptions of our environment literally change our bodies, our cell structure, our health. And there's a great book out there, The Biology of Belief by
mm,
Bruce Lipton, that can take you through that step by step, how it happens. So this is important work, the way we frame our life, the way we frame our past, the things we've been made to believe about ourselves when we were too young to defend ourselves from those voices that were telling us that. Until we're about 6 years old, our brain just downloads everything as truth. We don't really have the analytic capacity to sort through that and go, oh, mom's having a bad day, or this girl's jealous, or this teacher has another agenda, whatever. So those are very, very powerful. And I think one of the foundational things we can do is take a look at what we believe about ourselves, about our situation in the world we live in, about menopause, what's coming up. One thing I saw in a lot of women, particularly nurses and teachers, um, who had very stressful jobs that had them getting up extremely early in the morning, their sleep cycles were disrupted. They were in stress all the time, and they were literally counting down the minutes until they could retire. but they stayed in the jobs much longer than their bodies were telling them, "You need to get out because your health is going down the tubes," and they were seeing it happen, but they kept saying, I can't, because if I stop this, everything ends, I
Mm.
have to have this amount of financial security, and it has to look just like this." And the women that were able to break through that and go, okay, I'm going to step off the cliff here, not only did they heal themselves, their bodies healed, but they started to thrive because they moved toward what they wanted in their life and they had the energy to put toward it. And they ended up in better financial situations than they were had they stayed in their jobs and just kept banging their head against the wall. And I just see that over and over. So it makes me really feel like our beliefs are critical. And if we don't do anything else, just make a list, write them down when you think of one. What are my personal myths? What are my personal beliefs? What did my family teach me? What did my religion teach me? What did and just see how much of that you still believe or how much you ever believed was really true for you.
Yeah, that's really great advice. And what you're speaking into is so interesting because one of the core philosophies of functional thinking is that everything matters.
Yes.
Everything impacts our health. Everything impacts our energy. Everything impacts us at a cellular level. And our beliefs are really one of them. Our childhood is one of them. Our adolescence is one of them. Everything is part of it. And I love that you give these very concrete practices to explore, the ones you just mentioned. And then your book is filled with them, different practices to reflect on and dig into and think about. And some can be scary, but it's really a powerful way to move into our most authentic selves and to have that second half of our life that is so fulfilling and rewarding and the best yet, which I actually really believe is possible. So before we finish, I mean, there's so many more things I want to ask you, but what do you think? Like, what would you scream from a mountaintop, one thing that you would want women really to understand about this journey so that they can live their best life in the second half of their life?
Well, I'd like to tell them you've got this because they do. You've got everything you need to absolutely thrive and to be very aware of the messages that are being sent to you about this and to begin to discern what about this is real and what is somebody's agenda, what is habit, and the other thing would be in terms of the physical piece, begin to create a rhythm in your life because that is one thing that midlife women and beyond really, really benefit from. I mean, when we're young, we can run on fumes, we can be go, go, go all the time, we can fuel ourselves on caffeine and adrenaline and feel great. But it's like a bank account, especially with our energy and the adrenals. So as you get older, create a rhythm, allow your body to know basically when you're going to go to bed, when you're going to wake up, when your meal times are, when you tend to be more active, so that it can have the right amount of energy available for you when you're doing those things, but so it's not on overdrive all the time, because that just is needless spending from the bank account. And then when you need it, it won't be there. So I want women to believe in themselves, that they have a gift to give, that they have a purpose, and that this is the time of life to explore that and to live that purpose. And it can be so wonderful because you're not having to put yourself aside all the time for other people.
So much wisdom there. So, thank you so much, Susan, for joining me here and sharing all of your wisdom. And I really appreciate it. And if people want, they can find your book, Making Sense of Menopause. I can't recommend it enough. I think it is. I'm going to have the women in my hormone group get this book because it's the perfect complement to all of the physical things we can do for our body. There's so much here on an emotional level. So thank you for that. And thank you for your
Doing this
time.
work in groups is, if I can just say before we end,
Yeah.
so important because there you can tell your stories, there you can get reflections from other people. You can see what's going on is normal, that this is not the bugaboo it was made into. And that support and that community is just so important for moving forward. So I love that you run groups, and I think that, the most important place to start is telling your story.
Mm.
Because we hear things when the words come out of our mouth that sometimes we don't when we have the internal dialogue going on.
Yeah. Connecting with each other is really
Mm.
powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Susan.
Thank you.
Bye
Thoroughly
bye.
enjoyed talking with you.
That's it for this week. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a comment and review as that helps more people find out about it. You can find me and the courses I teach at mountainrebalance.com and on Instagram. If there's a topic you want to hear about, please reach out and let me know.